You're listening to Secret Sonics, a podcast exploring the creative side of music production. Hello and welcome back to Secret Sonics. I am your host, Ben Wallach. So once again, it's just me for this episode. It's going to be another Solocast, and the reason for that is because I had a guest lined up, and unfortunately it fell through in the last moment, but hopefully this guest will join us in a future date. And life has just been too hectic for me to do anything else about it. So I am going to explain what's been going on in my life and talk about some things that are maybe interesting to the listeners. So yeah, what you're listening to is my voice, and it sounds probably a little bit better than it did in the past two episodes. And that's because I am in my brand new studio, and I am back on the good mic and the good pre onto my main computer and no longer recording with a handheld mic into a Zoom like I did in the previous two episodes. And the reason why I was doing that in the previous two episodes was because of construction that was in basically in the building where my studio was. They're building another floor, and it was just so loud I couldn't even work. I couldn't think, I couldn't record, forget recording, I couldn't think. And I just knew right away I needed to move. And so I moved the studio into my home. So I lost like a bunch of business days. You know, there were days where I was running around the city recording in other studios so I could get some projects done, you know, and then the move itself took like a whole day. And then my son was sick with fever for 2 days. And then I'm still sort of setting up this studio, but it's at least working at the moment, which is great because it's been too long and I need to get work done, and including the podcast. So so let me just, I wanted to talk a little bit about that, but before I get into that, I also want to apologize to any Google Podcast users. The previous episode only published on Google Podcasts like tonight, which is Saturday night. I'm like actually recording this the day before I post this, which has never happened before, but this is what it's come to. Never mind, that happened once before on the day of the post. But in any event, yeah, so Google Podcast just published it for some reason now, which I'm like really upset about. And I don't know if it's the distributor that I'm using or if it's Google Podcasts' fault. Like I don't know what the deal was, but if you're a Google Podcast listener, I apologize that it didn't publish until now. Anyways, so my life has been pretty hectic, but here we are in the new studio. And so I wanted to talk about a couple things that went into that. So basically, first of all, I called my acoustician. There's a guy named Omer Carney who did the acoustics in my previous studio, and I asked him, "Hey, can you please move my studio into my apartment because I can't work here anymore?" And he basically said for the cost of moving it twice, he can do a brand new studio with new acoustics that he thinks will sound better because it's been 6 years since he built the studio, and he knows that his knowledge in the field has only gotten better, and he knows and the materials are different now, and he has a better idea of how to set up a room. And so, I mean, I don't know how long I'm going to be in my home for. So, and if I ever have to move back to the old space where my studio used to be, I just kind of decided to leave the acoustics up, and we're starting over. And so basically he built me a brand new studio, which I don't think looks as nice as the other studio because this was much cheaper than the previous studio was in terms of cost. It's much more basic. It's like black foam basically, but some really heavy duty foam actually, and it's like trapping bass on a level that my other previous space wasn't. And I'm hearing much more balanced tone coming out of my speakers, which is amazing. Anyway, so he built this studio from scratch, and I kind of took this opportunity to declutter and to make, to purge things I'm not using. And so it's been kind of an interesting shift. And the new studio, by the way, it sounds great it sounds great coming through the speakers, like as a mixer, it's amazing, but I still have a bit of work to do to make it as good as it was for recording. I feel like there's still not quite enough stuff on the walls. Like I want to get some curtains and stuff to, there's a bit too much reflections coming in for the recording, I think. I might be wrong. I don't know. I'm still learning the room. It's like, it's a new experience, but I'm going to make the room a little bit better. I'm going to go to IKEA probably tomorrow and buy some curtains and stuff and finish it up and get the vibe going, maybe get some lamps and stuff. But basically I took this opportunity to declutter. Basically, I've been in the same space for 6 years, and I figured it's time to make a stuff audit, just like audit all the stuff I have. And I really feel like I'm not even using so much of the things in the room. So let's just like get rid of the stuff I'm never using and make my setup much simpler and less messy. And basically, I'm going to probably I'm trying to sell some microphones, a second pair of monitors I was never using anyways. I'm using like a simpler desk that just actually has more room on it. It's like not like Omer, my acoustician, built me a custom desk in my previous studio, and I decided not to take it and just to use like a basic desk. And it's actually taking up a lot less space, and it's easier to work around. And so I'm kind of enjoying that. And it has like a drawer for like my keyboard. So it's like even I have like I have so much more space available, and there's like less things. I just decided not to take all the things with me into the new studio. So things are more spacious and less cluttery and more, it's just nicer to work like that. So we'll see how that goes. But still missing a bit of vibe. And as I said, it's all black foam and stuff, and still I hung like a little fabric poster I have, and I put some whiskey boxes above the acoustics. Looks kind of cool, but there's still a bit to do to make it feel like, I don't know. You want your studio to have some cool vibe to it and feel nice for artists to be in. So I'm going to be working on that this week. But yeah, like it's been 6 years, and Omer really like knows his stuff. It's crazy. He works like he's a machine. He sets up the speakers. He sees what the frequency response of the room is. He makes like this little noise. It goes all the way up to the lowest frequency to the highest frequency, and he examines the room, and he puts the acoustic treatment in different places and experiments until he gets about as flat a line as he can possibly get. And he's just done this. He said he's has more experience. He told me he has more experience working in doing acoustics in small like home studio rooms than anyone else in the world, he thinks, because in different countries people don't like deal with crappy rooms. They just they want to build a room from the ground up, and he just deals with whatever, and he makes it sound amazing. And he's really, I hired him for my first studio towards the beginning of his career, and now he's like the number one guy in this country, in Israel, doing this. He built a studio for Waves, the plugin company. He's done some serious stuff. Anyway, so I'll put a link to, you could check out his Facebook page or something in the show notes. And he actually agreed to join me on the podcast, but we ran out of time. So maybe I'll be able to, interview him and talk about acoustics on a later episode, because I think it's really interesting. And it's really important for people to hear about it. In any event, the other thing that I think is really cool about moving, aside from decluttering, right, is kind of just to have a change of scenery. And it's, I was in the same place for 6 years, and that's a long time. And, things can kind of feel stagnant. And so just to be in a different room with a slightly different vibe puts a new life could put new life into your work, give you more inspiration, and just feels like I'm starting fresh. And once again, like sky's kind of the limit. Whereas when you're in the same place for a very long time, it could kind of, it could feel like you're just, going in circles and not really going anywhere. So I'm excited to have this change of scenery. I think I need it. And as pissed off as I was at the construction, I kind of took it as a blessing in disguise. Like, you know what? It's going to be great to move, and it's going to be a good new thing in my life. And, we'll see. I'm just at the beginning of it. I guess I'll keep you guys posted about how it goes. It's also challenging to be, it's challenging to be in your home because, my son's in daycare until, 4:00. But then after that, he's coming home. So whether or not I'm picking him up, my day is going to kind of end around then. Maybe I could come back in at night like I'm doing now. But, it's my day is going to be less flexible than it used to be. In terms of booking artists, working with them. There's going to be cutoff times and stuff. So I'm going to figure it out and see how it goes. But so far, I'm enjoying the change of scenery. And there's photos on my Instagram, which there's a link. I'll put a link to my personal Instagram page at the bottom of this show notes. Beyond the Secret Sonics Instagram page, it's Ben Wallach Music on Instagram, and you can see some photos of the new studio there. And it's kind of cool. So, if you're in the area, stop by for a coffee. Other than that, I kind of wanted to talk about the podcast moving forward and things I want to accomplish. And basically, people have commented on this, and at a certain point, I felt it myself, as I felt like the podcast has become too much of a routine. And I really just want to make the podcast a bit more conversational. Like the previous 2 episodes I thought were really fun because it was just much less much less pressure, more conversational, more interesting things were coming up. And I really like interviewing people and like getting to the source of their creative flow, but I also feel like it needs to be a bit more of a free-flowing conversation. So I'm going to try to be doing more of that moving forward. The other thing is I haven't had a woman on this podcast yet, and I have tried really hard to get some women on the podcast, and I've only gotten a couple responses. It's interesting. Men have responded much quicker to join me on the podcast than women, and hopefully there's going to be a couple women at least in the coming episodes that I've finally heard back from. But if you know any really talented female music producers, I would love to have them on the show. It's not because I want it to only be a male, guest show. I want females as well. It just hasn't happened. And women, it's interesting. Guests that I have on the podcast usually recommend people to reach out to. And it's just been like this flow of like, okay, recommending more dudes. And yeah, like I think 98% of our field is maybe men. And that's a problem. It needs to change. More women. I'm sure there's tons of women that want to do this, and there's no reason why they shouldn't. And I want to represent that on the show. So I'm going to try to have female guests on the podcast. The other thing is to make this podcast more sustainable. I think I'm going to be doing less editing, but I think also as the podcast gets more conversational, it'll need less editing because it just takes so much time to edit a podcast, and I'm not making any money off of this podcast. It's purely to put something good out into the world, and how much editing can I actually do at a certain point? It just becomes unsustainable. So yeah, it's going to be a bit more chill, and I'm hoping that people will like it better because it's going to be more chill. So that's basically what you have to look forward to. But the podcast shall continue, and hopefully we'll have a great guest on the next episode. If you have any questions about my studio or about the podcast or about anything in general, or just any questions of anything you're dealing with now as a music producer, please send them to secretsonics@gmail.com, and I'll write you a response and take your feedback into consideration. That's about it for this episode. So I guess until next time, I hope you enjoyed. And I'm sorry if it's so many non-typical episodes in a row, but it's just the way my life has been. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. Take care, guys. Have a great week, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.